The following is an interview with Stephen Vitiello, sound artist and chair of kinetic imaging at VCU Arts. He made his breakthrough as a sound artist with the residency he did recording sounds of and from the 91st floor of the World Trade Center in 1999. I don't know Stephen personally, but he'll be one of my professors when I start the kinetic imaging program at VCU. First off, what is sound art?
I don't have it's funny, I laugh nervously because I don't have a perfect answer. And many years ago I came up with a response, and so many people jumped on it being wrong that at that time I associated sound art too closely with installation. But it can be, it can be radio, it can be stereo, it can be any number of things. I tend to think of it as starting conceptually somewhere in between visual art and music, often presented in art spaces. But almost anything I could say could be argued.
Do we need the term sound art?
It's so tricky because it's mostly academics who want definitions, and funders, and it's a way for people to encapsulate someone. I feel like anytime you get into labels like minimalism, most of the major minimalists hate that term. You find that often that people would rather reject a thing. I can't say I love the label, but I don't hate it, and it's helped me get opportunities and gallery shows and commissions and collaborations. So I don't know of a better term at this moment. I see whatever sound art has roots in many places, in experimental music and conceptual art, in visual art, and so there's many ways to look at it, and it's also different people come to it from different places. Some from literature, some from poetry, some from architecture.
How did you get into sound art?
So I played in bands for a long time, and I would try to play like punk rock guitar or post-punk at a certain point, but it wasn't until I heard Fred Frith's guitar solos and his use of motors and vibrators and putting little clips on the strings and bowing that I realized, oh, there is another way. Discovered a 60-minute CDR by John Hudak, who made these long, quiet pieces, and he had done a piece called Pond using hydrophones. I just loved the sound of it, but also the idea of just this long piece that you live with. I reached out to him because I was living in New York and he lived in Brooklyn, not far away. He invited me over and shared all sorts of things, including software, and I think he loaned me some contact mics. One of the most important people in my career is Bob Bilecki, who's a sound engineer who was the person when I was in the World Trade Center and was trying to figure out how to use contact mics on the window, helped me get the contact mics working. And I guess I've told this story a lot, but when I said I wish I could make sound like the color of this incredible sunset, he pulled out a pocket full of photocells and said, well, light has a frequency. If you can find a way to translate it, maybe I can wire something up for you. And he carved out the inside of an XLR tubing, replaced it with a photocell, wired it, built a little circuit for me. And that opened, so many mental pathways. And he came up one night with a telescope, and we pointed the photocell into the eye of the telescope, across the river to New Jersey and picked up the sound of the light of a police car going by. I ended up making what's probably still one of my most well-known and maybe most mature CDs, even though it was done so early, which is called Bright and Dusty Things. And I think all of my sound making started with photocell recordings.
What type of work is interesting for you?
I like site-specific work. If somebody gives me a white box gallery, I don't often have a lot of inspiration. I like when I'm given a space that has some kind of interesting sonic resonance, but also maybe cultural resonance, where I can walk in and feel something right away, but then there's room to research and to learn. Because people are so culturally conditioned to look like that visual is somehow dominant, but I want to make work in which sound is dominant. I have to really, once I get into a space, figure out, all right, what does this speak to me? But also, if there's going to be anything visual, or if the space has got some kind of strong visual itself, how do I shape the experience so that at least some viewers will understand that it's first and foremost a sound space. And sometimes the easiest thing is to turn the lights off, but sometimes that seems very, it's not the right balance. But sometimes I've worked with a lighting designer, I've worked with an architect. Often I do work that's multi-channel, so starting to figure out where to place speakers, where to place the viewer. If it's a certain kind of surround setup, is there really a sweet spot? If there's another kind of surround space that's more open-ended and people can move around, that's probably preferable, just because it's not telling you this is what you have to do. And in the same way, I try to make work that I have an idea of why I do the thing, but I also don't want to say, you have to get this point, otherwise you're not getting the work, And so a lot of what happens is I'm someplace, have an experience, and I want to translate what that experience did to me into a work of art, into a space, and give people a chance to have an experience. But again, it doesn't have to be, and they can't have my experience. If I was in the Brazilian Amazon, there was something so specific to being there. I can only bring a part of almost like a hopefully interesting shadow of that into a space in France or wherever I've been lucky enough to be invited to present it. But everyone is different. I do consider visuals because I'm often presenting in visual spaces, but I just try to do it very subtly. I remember one of my first kind of breakthrough shows, I was in a really big group show in New York at PS1 called Greater New York. Most people were in crowded spaces. I had a room to myself. And it was really kind of a breakthrough experience to see. Like, I was kind of disappointed because I thought, why are there only 3 or 5 people in my room when there's like 30 in the next room? And then I realized, oh wait, I'm lucky. Those 3 or 5 people are staying a long time, and they're getting something out of it that's very different than just walking through and quickly observing and moving on.
When you read literature, do you focus on sound?
I do, yeah, for sure. I mean, certainly certain writers. I've reread Virginia Woolf's The Waves so many times because I love her references to sound. There's certain writers. There's others like Murakami where I just like the way that he slips with reality, and maybe I'm not thinking about it in that moment, but then when I start working on a new sound piece and it starts with birds and then they go through some kind of manipulation into some kind of processed realm, I realize that something from the literature I like is influenced that. My favorite mystery writer is James Lee Burke, and he writes these really rich landscape-based mysteries set in Louisiana, and I know that that's influenced my connection to field recording, for example, and a kind of haunted South that I don't even feel in Virginia as much as I sort of fantasize about.
Thank you for the interview.